Dani Pedrosa. He was born with the talent to win championships, but history had no intention of making it easy for him. At just 125 centimeters tall and barely 50 kilograms, the Spaniard was a miracle on two wheels. He became a 125cc world champion at only 18 years old and backed it up with two 250cc world championships. By the time he stepped into MotoGP in 2006 with Repsol Honda, he was already the next big thing. And he was fast, incredibly fast. Pedrosa didn't just debut quietly, he arrived with victories. His cornering precision was art in motion, his ability to carry speed through tight bends unmatched. He could read a race like few others, preserving his tires until the last laps, always ready for a surgical strike. But the cruel truth of Pedrosa's career was that timing is everything in MotoGP, and his timing was brutal. Pedrosa's prime overlapped with some of the sport's most unstoppable forces. Valentino Rossi's dominance was in full swing during Pedrosa's early years. Whenever Pedrosa found form, Rossi was there, the giant who would not fall. When Rossi's grip loosened, another monster arrived. Casey Stoner, a fearless rider capable of making even flawed machinery look untouchable. Then came Jorge Lorenzo, a Yamaha machine who could be relentlessly consistent. And finally, Honda's own prodigy, Marc Marquez, joined Pedrosa's team in 2013, instantly becoming the center of Honda's world. Pedrosa was never given breathing room. Even worse, Pedrosa's career was riddled with injuries at the worst possible times. Broken collarbones, fractured wrists, nerve damage in his arm. He spent as much time in surgery as he did on the podium. In 2010, while chasing Lorenzo for the championship, a heavy crash at Motegi ended his title hopes. In 2011, he broke his collarbone again, missing multiple races when he had the form to challenge. In 2012, he had the best season of his MotoGP life. 7 race wins, podiums almost every round, and a chance to take the title down to the final races. But even that year, Lorenzo edged him out by just a handful of points. At Repsol Honda, Pedrosa was both indispensable and overlooked. He was the rider who tested the parts, gave the data, and developed the bikes that would later win Marc Marquez multiple titles. Pedrosa played the perfect team man, never making waves, never demanding the spotlight. But while Marquez basked in the glory, Pedrosa was often cast aside as the second rider, the quiet, reliable one. When Dani Pedrosa retired in 2018, he had 31 race wins, 112 podiums, and the admiration of every rider in the paddock. But he never had a MotoGP World Championship trophy in his cabinet. In another era, Pedrosa would have been a multi-time world champion, one of the greats. Instead, he was remembered as the quiet genius who was overshadowed by louder legends. In the cruel language of MotoGP, he was the man history forgot. Sete Gibernau wasn't born a favorite. He didn't have the fan base of Rossi, the swagger of Biaggi, or the backing of massive manufacturers. He was the quiet workhorse, the Spanish rider who gritted his way to the top. In 2003 and 2004, Gibernau became Rossi's most dangerous rival. He was relentless, riding with passion and intelligence. That Honda Gibernau rode for Telefonica Movistar wasn't quite as refined as Rossi's factory bike, but he didn't care. He pushed harder, rode cleaner, and believed he could beat the doctor at his own game. And sometimes he did. He beat Rossi multiple times in straight fights, winning races with smart defensive riding and aggressive overtakes. In 2003, he finished second in the championship, proving he was the real deal. In 2004, he was even closer. Pole positions, blistering race pace, and the confidence of a man who believed his moment had arrived. But there was one problem. Rossi was unbreakable. The breaking point came at the Qatar Grand Prix in 2004. The drama began before the race even started. Gibernau's team lodged a protest with race direction, accusing Rossi of illegally cleaning his grid spot with a scooter to gain traction on the dusty track. The penalty was harsh. Rossi was sent to the back of the grid. Gibernau had his victory laid out before him, but Rossi's response changed everything. He rode through the grid like a man possessed, carving through riders as if they weren't there. He caught Gibernau, passed him with a move dripping with contempt, and won the race. After the checkered flag, Rossi stared at Gibernau. Everyone knew the message: "You'll never beat me again." And Gibernau didn't. After Qatar, it was like a switch had flipped. He could no longer match Rossi's pace, no longer fight him with the same confidence. In 2005, Gibernau's form dipped dramatically. He began crashing, missing podiums, and losing momentum. By 2006, he was out of the factory Honda team altogether. Sete Gibernau was talented enough to win a world championship, but he had the misfortune of peaking during Rossi's prime. He went from being Rossi's biggest rival to being defined by the fact that he was erased by him. History didn't remember the fighter. It remembered the man Rossi broke, Loris Capirossi. Loris Capirossi was a warrior. The Italian earned a place in the history books before he was even old enough to legally drink, becoming the youngest ever 125cc world champion at just 17. He defended his title the following year and moved up the ladder with the reputation of a future superstar. But MotoGP is ruthless. It doesn't care about your potential. Capirossi's premier class career was defined by grit. When he joined Ducati in 2003, he was tasked with taming the wild Desmosedici, a beast of a bike with raw power and zero finesse. Most riders struggled just to finish races on it. Capirossi didn't just finish. He won, giving Ducati their first ever MotoGP victory at Catalunya in 2003. That win should have been the beginning of something special. By 2006, Ducati had a competitive bike, and Capirossi finally looked ready to fight for a championship. He was leading the points after the opening rounds, riding with confidence, aggression, and maturity. Then, Catalunya happened. In one of MotoGP's most horrific crashes, Capirossi collided with teammates Sete Gibernau and Marco Melandri. The impact left him with cracked ribs and internal injuries so severe that he could barely breathe. Most riders would have sat out. Capirossi returned to the bike weeks later, riding through unimaginable pain. But his championship hopes were already gone, and just when he was ready to fight again, Ducati signed Casey Stoner in 2007. Stoner's arrival was the end of Capirossi's time as the team's leader. Stoner dominated immediately, winning the title that year while Capirossi was quietly pushed aside. Outside Ducati, life wasn't any easier. He competed against Rossi's relentless dominance, Stoner's meteoric rise, Pedrosa's consistency, and the early peak of Jorge Lorenzo. Capirossi wasn't invisible. He was a race winner, a constant fighter, but he was always eclipsed by the legends around him. He retired with 29 Grand Prix wins, 3 world championships in the lower classes, and respect that can't be measured. But Capirossi's story is the definition of a legend overshadowed in his prime. He was Ducati's first hero, the man who bled for them before glory arrived. But in the end, glory was never his. Colin Edwards. Colin Edwards was a warrior born in Texas and forged in World Superbikes. He was the kind of rider you couldn't help but respect. Fearless, calculating, and brutally consistent. In 2000 and 2002, he became a 2-time WSBK world champion. His ride at Imola in 2002, where he battled Troy Bayliss in a winner-takes-all final showdown, remains one of the most legendary two-wheel duels ever captured on film. He beat Bayliss wheel-to-wheel, elbow-to-elbow, with championship pressure suffocating both of them. That day, Edwards showed he had the steel for war. And then he came to MotoGP. The timing should have been perfect. In 2003, the grid was shifting. The 500cc era had faded, and the new 990cc four-strokes were changing everything. But Edwards walked straight into a championship already owned by Valentino Rossi. By 2004, Edwards was Rossi's teammate at Yamaha. On paper, it was a dream pairing. 2 world champions with contrasting styles and endless potential. But on the track, Rossi made it clear he wasn't sharing the spotlight. Edwards didn't struggle. He finished second in races. He pushed for podiums. He consistently ran in the top 5. He was often the best of the rest. But next to Rossi, who was winning titles with poetic brilliance, Edwards looked like a support act. He wasn't slow. He wasn't failing. He was just stuck in the shadow of a living legend. Behind the scenes, Edwards worked like a machine. He was Yamaha's favorite test rider. His feedback was surgical. His understanding of bike balance and electronics years ahead of most. He tested new chassis, new tires, new electronics, all so Rossi could ride something bulletproof on Sunday. Rossi got the wins. Edwards carried the load. The closest Edwards came to MotoGP victory was in 2006 at Assen. On the final lap, he was leading. The race was his. But then, tragedy. He ran wide on the last chicane. Nicky Hayden, his fellow American, swept past him in a split second and won the race. Edwards crashed. He didn't just lose a win. He lost the one moment that might have changed how the world saw him. He raced in MotoGP for over a decade. No wins, just dedication. He was the technician, the teammate, the loyal workhorse who made others faster. In any other era, Colin Edwards would have been celebrated for his intelligence, adaptability, and fearless racecraft. But next to Rossi, he became invisible. He was Yamaha's backbone, but no one frames the spine. Andrea Dovizioso. Andrea Dovizioso wasn't flashy. He didn't play mind games. He didn't feed the media. He raced. That was it. Dovi entered MotoGP in 2008 as the 250cc world champion, and almost instantly, he proved he could belong. By 2009, he had joined Repsol Honda and won his first MotoGP race at Donington Park. It was a brilliant wet weather ride, showcasing calm under pressure. But that win wouldn't lead to more, not right away. Honda didn't see Dovi as their future. He was precise, methodical, but not marketable, not explosive, not Marquez. So Dovi found himself drifting from one satellite team to another, always in the mix, but never in the center. Then came the Ducati era. When Dovizioso joined Ducati, the bike was a disaster. It was aggressive, unpredictable, and had chewed up and spit out legends like Valentino Rossi. Most thought Dovi was just another placeholder, but he stayed, and he worked. And slowly, year by year, he rebuilt the machine. By 2017, the transformation was complete. Dovizioso didn't just win races, he fought Marc Marquez for the title. The two riders went to war in Austria, Japan, and Qatar. Each battle decided on the last lap, last corner, sometimes the last breath. Dovi won those fights. Clean, clinical, smart. But in the championship standings, he always came second. 2017, runner-up to Marquez. 2018, again, second to Marquez. 2019, once more, second to Marquez. 3 straight seasons of near perfection. 3 years where he could have been champion, would have been champion, if not for one man who seemed inhuman. Marquez was the wall Dovi kept smashing into, no matter how strong he became. And as Ducati started chasing bigger names, they forgot Dovi had been their savior. He left in 2020, not with bitterness, but with quiet dignity. Dovizioso's career is one of the sport's great ironies. The man who fixed Ducati, the only one to truly challenge Marquez in his prime, the most intelligent rider on the grid. And yet, to many fans, he was just the guy who always came second. In truth, he was the only one close to first. Randy Mamola. Randy Mamola was the wild child of 1980s Grand Prix racing. Spectacular slides, impossible saves, showboating wheelies. He was a fan favorite before MotoGP even understood what fan service was. But Mamola's career was heartbreaking brilliance. He raced during one of the most talent-packed decades in motorcycle history against Kenny Roberts, Freddie Spencer, Wayne Gardner, Eddie Lawson, riders who didn't just win races, but rewrote the rulebook. Mamola was always there, always fast, always fighting, but always second. He finished runner-up in the World Championship 4 times. 4. And each time, he lost to a generational great. It wasn't lack of talent, it was brutal luck. In 1980, he lost to Roberts. In 1981, again. In 1984 and 1987, he came close. But Freddie Spencer and Wayne Gardner edged him out. He switched teams, bikes, and sponsors trying to find the missing piece. Suzuki, Yamaha, Honda, all tried. All fell just short. Mamola didn't get trophies, but he got respect. He became the benchmark for how far you could push a bike without crashing. His body language on the bike was pure poetry. Elbows out, rear-wheel dancing, never giving up. Riders admired him. Fans adored him. The sport needed him. He later became a development rider, testing new technology and mentoring future stars. He gave more to MotoGP off-track than most champions did on-track, but the cruel tag stuck. Randy Mamola, the greatest MotoGP rider never to win a title. He wasn't forgotten. He was just never crowned. Nicky Hayden. Nicky Hayden's name will always be attached to 2006, the year he shocked the world and beat Valentino Rossi to the MotoGP title. But what most forget is that Hayden's prime was so much more than a single trophy. It was a stretch of years defined by perseverance, heart, and quiet excellence, overshadowed entirely by the Rossi phenomenon. The Kentucky kid entered MotoGP in 2003, straight from winning the AMA Superbike Championship. His first few seasons with Repsol Honda were about learning, but by 2005, Hayden had stepped up as a serious contender. He was fast, brave, and aggressive, but even when he won races, the world didn't seem to notice. Rossi was still the golden god, and Hayden was just the American with a smile. In 2006, Hayden did everything right. He was consistent, avoided crashes, and scored podiums nearly every weekend. Meanwhile, Rossi's season was chaotic. Mechanical failures, crashes, unforced errors. It all came down to the final race in Valencia. Hayden, the underdog, rode like his life depended on it. Rossi cracked. Nicky took the championship. But instead of celebration, Hayden's title was questioned. Critics called it a fluke. They said he only won because Rossi had a bad year. Even after achieving the ultimate goal, Hayden couldn't escape Rossi's shadow. And then, just as Hayden was supposed to build on that title, everything collapsed. Honda shifted its focus to Dani Pedrosa. Hayden's equipment got worse. His results declined. He remained fast, but never again was he given the tools to fight for another crown. He joined Ducati in 2009, hoping to revive his career. But Ducati had become a one-rider team, Casey Stoner's playground. Hayden spent 5 seasons fighting with an unrideable machine that Stoner somehow tamed, but no one else could. Through it all, Hayden stayed professional. He smiled, shook hands, showed up every race. No drama, no excuses. He was a world champion who never acted like the world owed him anything. In the end, Hayden was remembered for his character as much as his riding. But make no mistake, his prime was stolen by favoritism, corporate politics, and the impossibility of living up to Rossi's halo. He beat a legend, but he was never allowed to become one. Marco Melandri. Marco Melandri was a teenage prodigy who seemed destined for greatness. He won the 250cc World Championship in 2002 and entered MotoGP with expectations as big as his talent. And for a brief moment, it looked like he'd fulfill every promise. In 2005, riding for the Gresini Honda satellite team, Melandri stunned everyone by winning back-to-back races in Turkey and Valencia. He finished second in the championship championship, beating factory riders, making Rossi sweat, and proving that he was a genuine contender. He was only 23, but Melandri's story was defined by missteps and mistiming. After his breakthrough, instead of moving to a full factory team, he stayed with Gresini one more year. In 2006, he remained competitive, even won more races, but Rossi had bounced back, and Hayden took the title with relentless consistency. Then came the fateful decision. Melandri joined Ducati in 2008. The Ducati Desmosedici was a vicious machine. It had won the championship with Casey Stoner the year before, but it was completely tailored to Stoner's aggressive, front-loaded riding style. For Melandri, it was a nightmare. He couldn't brake how he wanted, couldn't turn, couldn't get the feel he needed to go fast. His confidence vanished. He finished 17th that season. From there, Melandri's MotoGP career never recovered. He bounced from Kawasaki to Honda to Aprilia, never quite finding the right package, never quite returning to the rider he once was. He eventually moved to World Superbikes, where he found success again, but the MotoGP world had moved on. In any other timeline, Marco Melandri could have been a world champion. He had the speed, the racecraft, the killer instinct, but he made the wrong move at the worst time, and it cost him everything. His prime wasn't wasted. It was buried, not by talent, by timing.